Hello and welcome back to the Balance Sheet, everyone. I'm Billy, and this is my co-host Raj. We've got a lot to talk about today. Appreciate you guys joining us again. Remember to like and subscribe on both Spotify and YouTube. We definitely appreciate it. Uh, lots to go over. In this episode, we're going to talk pretty in depth about Rhea Ripley and where we'd like to see her booking go. Stephanie Vaquer continues to be a juggernaut. Supernova, I think, is the word we've used before. Naomi just killing it as Miss Money in the Bank. Um, Queen of the Ring starting to heat up. But I think where we're going to start first is on the AEW side of things. We continue to move towards All In with Toni and Mercedes really being the only announced women's match, though looks to be some tag team formation coming up and possibly belts. But uh, controversial a couple weeks back, the women didn't get a lot of TV time on the 4 hour episode. That was a little rectified this week, but it's placement. Placement is still kind of the topic that has us uh, off, and especially Mercedes and Toni. And as Raj does, he's come today prepared with data and facts to back up why we think Tony Khan is kind of blowing it in regards to Mercedes and Tony. I'll kick it to you, Raj.
So I remember the 4 hour episode that just happened. I think it's what was this one called? The summer break or summer blockbuster.
Summer blockbuster. Yeah.
And I remember watching Swerve Osprey, which was the opening match of the show. And when I'm watching this match, I'm thinking, okay, this match is if you care about that stuff, it's gonna get a very high star rating because they have wrestled the match that the person who grades these things loves. And I was right. It got a 5.25 stars, which, okay, cool. It's his opinion. But then I started to really think about AEW watching the 4 hours. And I was watching it while the NBA finals were going on. So, that's obviously another tough thing for them to gain viewers because, you have the championship of the NBA going on at the same time. And I'm watching this and I'm thinking, where is the Mercedes Tony stuff? Like, we're 2 hours in, we don't get anything. And then I think on the collision part of the episode, 2.5 hours into the whole thing, Toni Storm comes out for her match and Mercedes comes out for the commentary. And then, the ratings come out the next day like they do. And lo and behold, the only segment that gained viewers was Mercedes Tony. 2 weeks prior to that episode, they were in El Paso. We were there. We were ringside. We taped the whole thing. And it was the only main event segment in 2 years that got, I believe, more than 10% of the aggregate viewers in the main event segment, which basically means, like I said, if you look at the total people who watched that segment, it would probably be in the million range. But the way it's done is they say who watched for the whole 15 minutes and we'll give you the average. And we think it's, 710,000 or something like that, which is still a 10% bump from what the episode was doing. And so I started to think about it and I said, why is AEW's numbers not growing? I feel like their momentum is better. I feel like in the crowds, the crowds are getting hotter. He's smartly booking smaller venues so it feels like a big deal. Arena Mexico show sold out in like 10 minutes. And that's about almost, that's going to be about 16,000 people. But then his TV ratings just aren't going up. So then I think, okay, well, here's his chance now. NXT loses Stephanie Vaquer. They're going to get Mariah May, but people didn't know they were getting Mariah. Well, they're still doing well for what they're supposed to do. And it hit me. AEW is never going to grow because it doesn't promote the segments that actually grow the audience. And when we watched this past week, if you didn't know anything about wrestling, there's no way you would walk away saying those two women are the main event. He didn't present them like a main event. It didn't look like a main event angle. It looked like I'm going to get some cheap TikTok views and YouTube views because I'm going to have, Mercedes basically lick her or kiss Toni, but I'm not I don't put effort into it. But then you watch the Okada Omega segment. You're like, "Ooh, that feels like a main event." I told you that. I messaged you. I said, this feels like the main event. I don't know about Mercedes and Toni. And I think you said something in that same chat. You said, Swerve Osprey didn't really do anything for me. Like, it was a match, and I understand why people love it, but for me personally, it didn't really do anything for me. And there are several Mercedes matches I would rate higher than it. So then I started to think, okay, maybe Billy, in saying this, it has a point, but the point is that the women are the piece that can grow his audience. Because women's wrestling fans have always felt like a redheaded stepchild in the United States. Whether it's Divas WWE, Sasha Banks, Charlotte being the only thing on TV for a year for the women, 3-minute matches, a Queen of the Ring tournament that Zelina Vega won, where the average match was like 3 minutes. Like, there's always been us women's wrestling fans who feel like no matter how much they get pushed, they always at some point pull them back. Like, you have said on this podcast that you thought Triple H sabotaged Bayley and Io, that they were white hot. And then as they were running white hot and people were starting to say, well, maybe this should main event, we'll put the kibosh
cool it down.
Rhea, Bianca, Io were white hot going into WrestleMania, right? Like, they had some of the best segments on TV. The one where Io slapped both of them in Madison Square Garden and the crowd's losing their mind for Io. Everybody's like, oh, this looks like a main event. And then 2 weeks later, they announced Seth Punk Reigns is the main event. Don't bother us. Here you go. Now, Io, Rhea, and Bianca kind of proved their point with their match, but it goes back to Toni. Like, and I've always said this, I think Tony Khan is very needed for professional wrestling. I think what he's done has been fantastic. I think having a competitor that pays what he pays and makes the TV money he makes is great. But he still books his product for him. I don't think he books his product for the fans. I think he books for what he wants. And it's like he reads this newsletter and he grew up on it, like I grew up on it. And he's like, oh, that's what's going to get me these star ratings. I'm going to book it that way. And like Okada Omega, look, in 2017, they probably saved me from staying afloat with professional wrestling, that feud, because WWE sucked in 2017. Like, that was, people, that was the Sasha Banks, being, beaten by a pole or a ring post like that. They were just bad. WWE was bad. So when I watched Okada Omega, I was like, oh my God, these guys are amazing. But 8 years later, a lot has changed. And I don't know if they're going to get one more new viewer because of that feud main eventing. I don't think they're going to get one more new viewer from Moxley and Hangman Page main eventing. But where they can get a lot of fans is if AEW put Mercedes and Toni in the main event. And I know this because we have listeners who are also, we have some relationships with in terms of just they message us. And two separate women, listeners of this show, messaged me who do not watch AEW. So they don't watch AEW. But they keep up on YouTube with Mercedes segments because they love her and they love Toni. And I said, if they put them in the main event, would you order the pay-per-view? And they said, yes, I would order it. Where I'm going with this is that if I'm like, what frustrates me is the numbers are there for Tony Khan. He is only profitable because of Time Warner. or Warner Brothers. He is not profitable because of pay-per-views or house shows. If it was just pay-per-views and house shows, he would be out of he wouldn't be out of business because he has too much money, but he would be hemorrhaging money in his, like, not hemorrhaging money to his overall bank account, but if you look at it from a business standpoint, he'd be hemorrhaging money. You can't pay
Yep.
millions in salaries and make thousands. That's bad math. He's making $180 million a year from Warner Brothers. 180. The only segment that I have seen that has drawn Mercedes Toni numbers is Mercedes Toni. I can't find another men's segment in AEW recently that draws like that. No MJF, no Hurt Syndicate, no Hangman Page, no Moxley. None of that draws. But Mercedes and Toni, the night we were there in El Paso, had magic. And I thought when he saw the ratings, and I was silly to think this, he got his main event. Like when he looked at the ratings the next morning, he's like, I got it. This is it.
Yep.
People want this. I'm going to give it to them. And he won't do it. He will not main event them because he has already told me it's not as important as Okada, Omega, or Page, Moxley. And where I'm going, and I'll give it back to you here, is that my frustration as a fan of women's wrestling is what else do we have to do to get, whether it's Tony Khan or even to a lesser degree Triple H, to know that, hey, the women are a draw and they deserve equal billing. Now, I think Evolution, the way he puts, how much, you see how much time now the women are getting on main roster WWE. I think they kind of have figured this out, and NXT is NXT. But Tony Khan, I don't know what it is. It doesn't feel like to me he's a big fan of women's wrestling, but he's a fan of stars. Mercedes is a star. Tony has become a star. So he's a fan of them. But I don't know if he enjoys what they do in the ring. And the only reason I say that is how he books the other women on the roster. Where's Willow? Where's Chris? Like, Chris is in a 2-minute segment. And, Queen Aminata, everybody's raving about her, but she's on TV sporadically. So I guess my thing back to you is Tony, if he's not going to pay attention to the actual ratings, then there's no hope. And I think that's sad, but it feels like to me that he's made up his mind that women should be a part of his show, but they're not the part of the show.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's Hangman and Mox has been given main event treatment. Okada and Omega this week was given main event treatment. Mercedes and Toni were given beginner main event treatment 2 weeks ago. You can make an argument maybe he's waiting to fire that one on all cylinders as we get closer. We do still have 4 weeks, and I'd love for him to prove us wrong. My big concern, though, is I actually don't want Mercedes and Toni to main event because we all got a hashtag together. Mm-hmm. I want it to main event because it was given equal time to the other two possible main events. Equal time and equal writing depth. And we're at 3 of 3 weeks where it's grown. Even on a collision coming out at 9:30 at night, the total number is not big, but it grew in a show that didn't have growth. But you can only play with that fire so long if the segment is, Mercedes is ringside eating steak. Now, they did finish the collision episode or segment better with Mercedes attacking her after kind of the innuendo laden kind of smelling her, which for Mercedes fans who haven't been watching AEW for a long time, that's something Toni, if it seemed weird, that's something Toni has done to a lot of her opponents, kind of lean in and smell them. There's a clip of her doing it to Deonna Purrazzo. So it was a mind game thing for Mercedes. I wish that had been on Dynamite because the middle segment that was on Dynamite was Toni ate Mercedes steak. Mm-hmm. And that was what happened. And I mean, that's not that's not going to get you a main event having that be the thing. To your point about the men, people message us sometimes, why do you guys care about ratings? Why should an AEW fan, if you're an AEW hardcore fan that grew up on AEW and Hangman's your dude and you love Will Ospreay and exactly what you got from Swerve Ospreay is exactly what you want out of your wrestling. Why should Tony diversify? Wrestlers are going to get paid more across the board the healthier both companies are. WWE is going to pull less stupid shenanigans where they flip off the wrestling world with some of the weird shit that they do, the better Tony and AEW's numbers are. The wrestlers will continue to be able to negotiate higher salaries the healthier, AEW's numbers are. So that stuff does matter. You shouldn't be sitting there watching the show going like, oh, how's this going to do in the ratings? But it's worth looking at after. And I called it. I said the Swerve Ospreay match for a TV match, people left.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's not. I love I like Swerve a lot, and I like a lot of the stuff he's done. I saw Ospreay, Buddy Murphy. It escapes me what his name in AEW is, so I apologize. But
Buddy Matthews.
Buddy Matthews, yeah. So I saw them wrestle live, and I enjoyed the hell out of that match. I thought Buddy brought it and brought out some really good stuff, realism out of Ospreay. This Swerve Ospreay match was 5 to 8 minutes too long, had too many choreographed spots for my personal liking. And there's a segment, I'm not going to get on Twitter and, hey, this is garbage. I'm not saying that, but it lost viewers. It was a long TV segment, not because it was bad quality necessarily or anything. It just didn't fit for TV. And Tony does that because it entertains Tony. And Tony likes his matches to get 5-star matches. And he knows Swerve and Ospreay can get a 5-star match. Mm-hmm. They roll out of bed and get a 5-star match the way that they put matches together. Mm-hmm. It's not going to compete with WWE if that is what you do over and over and over. So the numbers show.
Yeah. So to anybody who says, why do we care about the ratings? Why do ratings matter? In a vacuum, they don't. You watch the show for your enjoyment of the show. You don't care about the ratings, right? Because we don't work for Time Warner. I don't work in TV anymore. These things don't really mean anything to me. I'm just an observer at this point. These things did matter to me from a marketing standpoint, but they don't now. But here's why it does matter. If you're Warner Brothers and you cut a check for $500 million, and you said, okay, I'm going to give you $500 million. This is 3 years for this product. In good faith, Tony, as the person who runs this program, needs to do the things that the viewers are telling him they want to see more to help grow the ad revenue and to help the ad rates. Because if I'm Time Warner and I look, and again, I know people, and if I'm Time Warner and I look at these ratings from 2 weeks ago in El Paso, I'm like, okay, why are these two women not on your program more, Tony? Like, why are they not heavily featured more? Because the numbers tell us that there's something here. Now, people think, oh, well, they don't do that with WWE. You want to bet? You should, and I know this just from some off the record conversations I've had, messages I still have on my phone. A month ago, came on this show with you, and we broke down the ratings supernova that Stephanie Vaquer was. And lo and behold, she's on Raw, which is 100% Netflix. I said worldwide, outside of the United States, she's a bonanza, but Netflix is getting it. 2 weeks later, she's on Raw for Netflix. Do you think Netflix, who pays $500 million a year, has no say in that? Do you really think anybody who doesn't spend the money doesn't have a say. Look, we are not here to talk about the NFL, but when the NFL TV networks were losing ratings because of the kneeling, they went to the commissioner and said, "Hey, you got to get that stuff out of here. We're losing people." And what happened? Because guess who cuts the check for Tony Khan or TKO? It's the TV networks. It's Netflix.
Yeah.
It's not, oh, thank you for this money. I don't have to listen to you. Of course you do. If Time Warner really wanted to like put their force into it and went to Tony and looked at these ratings. So where I'm going with this as a fan of women's wrestling, for all of us, watch those segments. Make sure you tune in. Go to YouTube, go to TikTok, whatever metric is you think is the way you want to view, because eventually the TV networks will come in and tell Tony, yeah, because it was never an accident that the Sasha Banks character was heavily featured on SmackDown when they were on Fox. That was not accidental. That was on purpose.
Right.
So, yes, in a vacuum, ratings don't matter, but they matter a lot. And your point is also the second part. If AEW can get up to 1 million viewers a week, which right now seems like a pipe dream, they're not even at 700,000. But let's say they can. You have two products that are in the high end of TV ratings. That means wrestlers have more leverage. That means wrestlers get paid more. That means you're going to get a better product across the board because they're competing for your money. And I think Tony, like I said, loves being the rebel promotion, and he loves being the darling of newsletters and the darling of Twitter. But that's never going to grow his base, because in Mercedes Moné, and I know everybody's going to say we have rose-colored glasses, we're very biased, we think, I've gotten messages, and I thought we've articulated this very well on this show, of people saying, she's not a draw, dude, let it go. And I'm like, no, like, I have the numbers, she is. And people are
100%.
like, oh, she isn't. And then they would say, is she a draw like Roman Reigns? No, but that doesn't mean she's not a draw, right? That doesn't mean, like, if, I guess, go to basketball terms, if I were to say that Giannis is not a superstar like Michael Jordan, I'm not wrong, but that doesn't mean Giannis isn't a superstar. So
Right.
Mercedes is a draw, but if you're comparing her to Cody Rhodes, or you're comparing her to John Cena, or you're comparing her to Roman Reigns, maybe she isn't. But I would also point out to any of those people, when she had the same machine behind her, she was. When she had the same machine behind her, she was outdrawing Reigns, and she was outdrawing Cena. So she doesn't have the machine anymore, so you cannot compare. But in the small machine she has, with the limited amount of time she sometimes gets, she does outdraw the men in her own company, and that's the fair comparison to make. Don't compare her to, a woman. Don't compare her to Rhea Ripley now, because Rhea Ripley has a machine, and Mercedes has a little engine. It's a difference.
Yeah, well, and there's also a diversification of viewers too, right? The Cena draw, you say, X amount of people tune in for John Cena, X amount of people tune in for Cody Rhodes. If that was a Venn diagram, there's a gigantic overlap on that. You got a lot of people who will tune in for John Cena or Cody Rhodes. And so if they're both there, who gets the credit? And or if only one of them's there, that person's tuning in. And that's why WWE is always thought of as kind of bigger than the performers. Roman Reigns is probably the person who broke out the furthest from that, where, the significant growth during his run, people who stopped watching WWE came back. And I think Cody and Jey Uso have kind of drafted off of that, but Roman regrew that pie bigger. Mercedes is drawing groups of people that don't tune in for other people in AEW, okay? People who tune in for Hangman also tune in for Swerve, and they also tune in for Osprey, and they also tune in for Mox. Maybe not all four of them, but there's overlap in all of those guys because it's a style. And we're not saying take those guys off the show. Tony, have the Swerve Osprey match, do all that, but don't ignore the segment of your company where you're getting ratings boosts, you're getting viewers who aren't tuning in for other things, and you're hitting numbers that you're not hitting with other people. I think you eloquently just said it. You owe it to your people. You owe it to Time Warner. That's why they signed you, to look at the numbers and go, "Oh, this is working. I need to do more of it." And frankly, we are just advocating for Mercedes and Toni Storm to be able to get the same platform as the other two main events, to go into All In, and if they are the hottest one of the three with the same amount of opportunity, they should main event. That's it. But they
Yeah.
shouldn't be given the cool down. It's funny, and this is, go left field, and we can go another 30 minutes if we go down this thing. But if you look back the last 5-6 years, WWE has done a fantastic job booking their women, giving a lot of TV time during the summer. And wrestling fans are like, oh man, WWE's really figured it out. And then we end up frustrated again during the spring, during WrestleMania season. And the women don't get enough time, and they don't get as good a writing. And that's that next mountain we all need to cross, is the biggest events the women need to have, similar amount of matches, similar amount of time to build, and similar amount of quality to build is what we're advocating for. But the Mercedes, if you don't think Mercedes is a draw, you are willfully just ignoring data and, frankly, money. People don't pay Mercedes because Raj and I like her.
No.
People pay Mercedes because a lot of people like her and tune in for her stuff.
Yeah, and so you said something about the advertisers, and that's obviously a part of the story, but I'm going to say something here that I will 100% guarantee you will disagree with, but I'm going to say it. If Tony Khan is looking at his card and he's saying, okay, if I put Tony and Mercedes in the main event, can they actually have a better in-ring match than Okada Omega? I don't think so. Okay. Because in my opinion, Mercedes, if Okada and Omega give us what they are capable of, Mercedes and Tony don't have a chance to have a better wrestling match. They don't have a chance. I know every Mercedes could walk, but I'm being honest. Like Okada Omega, what they have done in the ring is unsurpassed. Like those 4 matches I put up there with any series of matches anybody's ever had. Okay.
Well, and you have that history that Tony and Mercedes can't even replicate, along
But
with
that's not all about wrestling.
Yeah.
If that's the only thing that professional wrestling draws is in the ring, then WWE would have AEW's audience and AEW would have WWE's audience, right? Because if it was just about these specific type of matches, AEW would be, 500 million a year, and WWE would be the fledgling kind of upstart. So whether Mercedes and Tony can have a better match is irrelevant to what you have said. If they have the hottest story that has attracted people, different groups of people coming in, like, hey, I'm just going to come for this one big event, then they have to main event because they have the hot angle. And that's why I thought, okay, for WrestleMania, I was like torn between the 2 3-ways because there were weeks where I thought Io, Rhea, Bianca had the hotter thing. But then there are weeks that, like the one week where they had that when Reigns came back at the Garden. I was like, oh, I don't know. Okay, this, what? It might be over for the women at this point. Because like Reigns added something to that 3-way. And then the Paul Heyman thing, right? That I'm like, I don't know. But if it's just about in the ring, then Mercedes and Tony can't main event. If that's what Tony is going for, which is oh, Mercedes and Toni Storm should main event because they're going to have the best match, then they can't main event because it's going to be hard. But that's not why main events are main events. Macho Man and
Right.
Elizabeth's wedding main event at a SummerSlam I attended in person. Was it because they no, because it's the story was the best story. So if he can give Toni and Mercedes equal time to what he gives the men, and the fans tune in at higher numbers, watch more. Go look at, for people who are thinking we're like bloviating here, go look at Mercedes Toni Storm's TikTok numbers, Instagram numbers, YouTube numbers, and then go compare them to Okada Omega, Mox Page, and come back to us. And then tell us
Yep.
we're crazy, because we're not. I just think Toni has an obligation to his own viewers. His own viewers are tuning in more to that feud than they are the men's feud, and he's not listening. And the worst thing about a wrestling promoter is when they don't listen, they lose the plot of the show. Mina Shirakawa used to have music. She had different music in AEW. People complained, and the next hour he changed it. He said, "You know what? I've heard you. I'm changing it." Well, Toni, whether you listen to this show directly or somebody on your staff listens to the show, which I know in every wrestling company, there's somebody who listens to every one of these type of podcasts. That's their like full-time job. Toni, give Mercedes and Toni equal time on TV and put them in the main event, because that would set you apart. Because on a weekend where Bill Goldberg is going to have his final match against Gunther, yes, spoiler alert, you'll get that story flushed out tomorrow on Raw. And Evolution is going to have an all women's pay-per-view that possibly could have Io against Stephanie Vaquer in the main event, or Rhea against Io rematch, or Tiffany against Rhea. I don't know what the match is, but where I'm going with this is you need something to stand out to women's wrestling fans. And if you don't put Toni and Mercedes on the main event after all the numbers they've done, then you're telling us that women's wrestling really in your mind doesn't really matter. And that's a shame.
Yeah, and it's mostly just about the cooldown, right? Like again, if you give the best shot to all three and it doesn't resonate in that way, then it's like, okay, it's going to be somewhere great on the card, and Toni and Mercedes are going to do a great job with it. But when Mercedes called her shot a month or two ago and said, I want a main event All In with Toni Storm, I know, we know her, we follow her well enough to know that she just wants to be given a shot for that to be the best match on the card. Just exactly what you're asking for. Now, before we pivot into some of the WWE stuff, we do have this 2.5 hour Arena Mexico card on Wednesday. Mercedes is fighting for the CMLL title versus Zeuxis.
Mm-hmm.
It's a rematch. It's actually her third match back. As part of the Stephanie feud, she had a Dynamite match, which had some good stuff. So it should be a fun, good little match. Based on the advertisement, it is the main or the second main match. We don't know if it'll main event or not, but is she going to win another belt? Is Toni going to stop her from winning a belt? We've got a really good shot for a seminal moment in this feud. And my last thing is Tony Khan, all gas, no brakes. If you were slow playing this for a 4-week sprint, we are in the sprint. Toni and Mercedes should be progressing in a major way every Dynamite the rest of All In season. They are the biggest women's match you've ever put on your show. Let them be as big as they could be. Don't constrain it. Don't cool it down. That's all we ask for, because that happens far too often in women's wrestling. And I think fans are sick of it.
Yeah, I always thought that the one thing that wrestling promoters care about more than anything else is their ratings. This stems from the Von Erichs in World Class Championship Wrestling, to Ric Flair in the NWA territories, to Hogan, Macho Man, to outsiders in NWO to Bill Goldberg to Eddie Guerrero. I mean, when people draw TV ratings, eventually they push to the top because you just cannot deny it because you're going against your own fans. And when I looked at these numbers with Toni and Mercedes, I was like, there's a pretty clear message here. Like, there's a real group of people who do not watch this program except for this segment. There's
Yep.
a fan base out there that is like, yeah, I'll come watch your show when you put these two on TV, but I'm leaving the other, whatever, 110 minutes or whatever the length is. But I think if I'm Toni, you're right, all gas, no brakes. And if by the end of we get to All In, they have the TV numbers to support it, because he's not going to sell any more pay-per-views if he announces right now Paige, Mox are the main event, or Okada, Omega. He's not going to sell one more. It's the same amount of number. But if you say Mercedes and Toni Storm are going to main event, there's going to be people who buy that pay-per-view, or Mercedes fans are like, oh my God, she's going to win every belt. And then there are going to be fans who don't like her who are going to buy it just to see her lose. So that's what you need to do.
And in-person attendance as well, by the way. If you announce Mercedes Toni as the main event, say in 2 weeks, the amount of people that are going to book an airline flight to Dallas and go to the show, as we've seen with some of these NJPW shows with Mercedes, with Evolution. And by the way, that's what you're competing against, actually. The ratings part of Evolution, they don't need it on the same day because that is WWE going after a segment of the audience going, book to Atlanta to go to this show instead of book to Dallas. And we know that. That's not conjecture because that's us, right? We looked at that weekend and was like, man, if we could go to one, it's like, do you go to All In or do you go to Evolution? And where do you throw your support? So I'm holding out a little bit of hope that maybe he's throwing the nitro booster on this one last. I do think he understands how big Toni and Mercedes are. I'd love to think that ratings are just as important to him as everyone that you just named. It's just a little bit weird to have their best main event ever 2 weeks ago, or not ever, but recent main event growth in a long time 2 weeks ago. And then we get 2 straight weeks of Mercedes eating steak. That being said, full attack on Toni and then Mina. So there's no more like segments where they're like, just chatting shit on the outside. It should be go from here, and hopefully that's what we get.
So, we're here talking about AEW, the power of Mercedes Moné and how, she's really elevated. She's brought in a little bit of a new audience to AEW. And so I want to segue to our next topic here, which is, so a year ago at Forbidden Door, an event that friends of ours attended in person, Mercedes Moné fought the Stephanie Vaquer for the NJPW Strong title, which is the purple belt, as they call it. And off of that match, Stephanie Vaquer became the hottest free agent in professional wrestling. Like, literally, as soon as that match ended, the bidding war was on, as they say, and this isn't, again, conjecture. This is fact. This has been reported by multiple outlets that as soon as,
and confirmed by Stephanie herself, by the way.
Confirmed by Stephanie herself. But as soon as that match ended, the people who report on this stuff, they said, oh, WWE is really hot about her. They want her. They really want her. Full court press. And then, that whole week, people there was like a lot of this weird reporting, like, well, she wasn't really in Toronto. And she was in Toronto. Like, that was a real thing. We actually reported that here. Like, we stamped it saying, hey, we know she was at the NXT show in Toronto negotiating, right? And people were like, oh, yeah, how do you know? Do you have her flight plans? Well, no, she told you that they sent the plane for her the next morning or maybe even that night. Because remember, Forbidden Doors in New Jersey. New Jersey to Toronto is not a long flight, it's like an hour
No.
flight, right? So, where I'm going with this is okay, professional wrestling is all about a person giving the rub to the next person. And if the next person becomes bigger than the person who gave the rub, it's okay to still give credit to the person who opened that door for this person. So I'm not going to acknowledge the person's Twitter handle. I'm not going to give this person any shine. But somebody went back and forth with both of us individually, saying that Stephanie Vaquer's hard work, dedication, and genius got her all of this WWE acclaim and attention, and Mercedes had nothing to do with it because Mercedes is overpaid and overrated, and she was just lucky enough to be booked to beat Stephanie that night, and that's all she did. But she had nothing to do with Stephanie getting all of the WWE attention. AEW went back, all that stuff. And into that person, and that's where this segment is going. We got to stop putting down, it doesn't have to be just Mercedes, any of the women competitors to make our favorite look better. Because that's not what wrestling is about. Like, wrestling is about helping the person in you're in the ring with to be better. So it's like, hey, you come in this way, and then I want to make you here so we can draw more money down the road. Now, in this case, the more money that Stephanie's going to be drawing is going to the competitor. So it's not going to help Mercedes directly or AEW directly, but it's going to help women's wrestling. Because as Stephanie gets bigger and bigger, and oh, by the way, to prove our point, she has the number one selling merchandise item for the women in WWE. By the way, this roster has Rhea Ripley on it, and Rhea Ripley has outsold every man on the roster in multiple times. So for the fact that Stephanie Vaquer has the number one selling shirt for a month for on the women's side, and that roster has Rhea Ripley and Alexa Bliss and Naomi and Io and a lot of hot women competitors, that tells you how hot Stephanie is. But it's okay to give Mercedes the credit. And I'm a Stephanie, everybody knows I'm the president of the Stephanie Vaquer fan club, but like, it's okay to give Mercedes the credit. It doesn't demean Stephanie at all by saying Mercedes' match at Forbidden Door opened the door for her to become this supernova in WWE. It is okay. And I think for me, it's becoming annoying that it's like we can't give Mercedes the credit, but we can give other women, like everybody gave Rhea the credit and Bianca the credit for putting over Io, but nobody wants to give Mercedes the credit for putting over Stephanie, even though Stephanie lost the match. So that's,
Yeah.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. No, and again, the whole point of why you and I get on here every week and kind of talk through some of this stuff is like, I think facts matter, and people take away what the internet and the Twitter discourse is. Wrestling has a long history of people at the top smushing down the people below them and protecting their spot. This is, everyone inherently knows this. This is why there's the jokes about Hogan, right? Someone wins a lot of matches and all of a sudden they become, their first name and Hogan as the last name. That doesn't work for me, brother. That's why that's a joke. Triple H, ever heard of the Reign of Terror? Baby faces he smushed during that time that looked worse from it, right? We can all recognize when someone has been booked to look like a moron. When someone is made to look like a fool during a storyline and then the match doesn't pay off. Booker T and Triple H is one that comes to mind. All we are saying is multiple. Stephanie is incredible, and what she does from here forward, yes, is going to be on who she is and her work. But Mercedes did open the door to a room that wasn't open to Stephanie at that time. She had tried out for WWE. WWE had seen her matches. Julia was signed to WWE when she wrestled Stephanie for the purple belt, because the reason Julia lost it was she was going to WWE. You don't think they watched that match? CMLL had their belt on Stephanie, and she was supposed to wrestle in Rev Pro and win the Rev Pro title a month later. So you can't even say that WWE was scouting her imminently and ready to sign her after her business with AEW. She had all these other big dates planned independently. And the Mercedes match had them acting quickly. Where we want to give Mercedes credit is Mercedes is a big enough star, and that match was on her territory. She absolutely could have had that match produced where she got 70% of the offense. Stephanie got to do one or two cool things, and she won, and we would have just moved on. She was trying to make Stephanie look good. She did want Stephanie to sign with AEW, and she did want Stephanie to be able to grow to be a massive star. Did she think she was going to sign in WWE? She ain't stupid. She knew that there'd probably be some level of interest there. But again, the person you're talking about said, "Oh, so we should give Mercedes credit for doing her job." We should give Mercedes credit for being giving in the ring, because
Actually,
a lot of stars are not giving in the ring, especially
yes,
to an unsigned talent who you don't know for a fact is going to go on to do matches with you.
we have to be consistent too. And so my answer to that question is yes, because there were people who, once Stephanie signed with WWE, I remember how mad they were at Mercedes. They're like, "Oh my God, this is her fault. Why'd she have to make her look so good in the ring?
Yeah.
Why wouldn't she just squash her? Because then AEW would have been the only ones interested in signing her, and we could have kept Stephanie." So you got to be consistent here. Like, what is it? Is it she should have squashed her so AEW selfishly could have kept her, or is it she should have been the professional she was and give Stephanie the platform she gave her to make Stephanie more money and change the trajectory of her career? Look, if Mercedes and Tony Khan had a DeLorean, they would go back and they would assign Stephanie before AEW's Forbidden Door. Okay.
Yep.
If they know what they know now, they would have signed her, because hindsight is 2020 for all of us. If there's no way that Tony Khan, every time he hears a Stephanie Vaquer merchandise number or a Netflix rating number, or how she trends on Twitter, like when she lost to JC and people are losing their mind, there's no way Tony Khan's looking at this and be like, "My God, I was such an idiot. I should have signed her," because he had a year to sign her before anybody else.
Yeah, and the DeLorean would be Mercedes saying, "Hey Tony, Stephanie is the real deal, and we're going to tear the house down. You should sign her now."
Yeah.
Two things real quick. Go watch the first match at Resurgence and the Forbidden Door match back to back. Mercedes was a gigantic baby face at the Resurgence match. Stephanie played the heel character, and the match was set up. I think Mercedes probably got 55-45 on the offense on that one. Forbidden Door, Stephanie got 60+% of the offense. That doesn't happen by accident. And that's not a decision Stephanie gets to make in that moment, by the way. Again, this is how wrestling works. You do not get to have 60% of the offense on the AEW talent unless the AEW talent sets up the match that way. But when I say offense, Mercedes had almost equal control time, but Mercedes was really healing it up. So instead of hitting big moves on Stephanie, she'd hit a move and then she'd get the crowd to boo her. But the cool things, the plancha and the rope springboards and all that stuff, were to highlight Stephanie's incredible ability. And this is not to take away anything from Stephanie at all. She is incredible, and this was a launching pad for her. And she appreciates it too, because we know that, again, we'll go back to her words. Her current dream match, her WrestleMania dream match is third match versus, as she said, Sasha Banks. Her words, not mine, not Raj. What's your dream match? Someone said. She said, I'd like to wrestle Sasha Banks at WrestleMania. So I think she likes being in the ring with Mercedes. So you can go ahead and not hate on Mercedes and call her overpaid and that she's not that good.
Yeah, and I also think that all of us wrestling fans, and we've given this public service announcement multiple times, not only do I want every wrestler to be overpaid, I want every wrestler to be paid more. So if
Yeah.
Mercedes is making 5 million, I want her to make 10. And if Roman Reigns is making 10, I want him to make 20. Because the percentage of revenues that wrestlers get in comparison to everybody else in entertainment is comically laughable bad. Like, it's to the point where I've been in meetings. I'll never forget this. I was at a convention in Las Vegas, a TV thing, and we were playing blackjack, me and two people. I'm not going to say who they are. And we were talking about, they were asking me, just because they know I'm the wrestling encyclopedia. They're like, how much do you think Roman Reigns makes? This is like 2021, I think. And I'm like, I don't know. He probably makes like 7 million a year. And they're like, that's it. They're like, the 12th guy on the Warriors makes 10 million. Right? Like, and the 12th
Yeah.
guy on the Warriors is not as important to the NBA as Roman Reigns is to the WWE, right?
Right.
It's like one of those things that wrestlers are just underpaid because they don't have a union and
Not collectively bargained yet.
they don't collectively bargain, and they're not, I don't want to say they're not smart enough. They're too selfish for their own good.
The
Like,
closest that ever came, Hulk Hogan squashed it.
yeah. They're too selfish for their own good. But like, as somebody who's a diehard, been a Mercedes fan for the last 10 years for sure. The red hair Sasha Banks character is how I fell in love with that character. Stephanie is like, I don't know if she's my current favorite wrestler, but she probably is, because everybody who listens to this show tells me it is. So okay, she is. But I can be the first to admit that, like, I'm glad that she had the match with Mercedes, because I got to see Stephanie in the WWE, because for all of the criticism that they get, and they deserve a lot of it, they have done a magnificent job of pushing Stephanie Vaquer. They have done as good a job as you could have done. If a year ago I told somebody she's going to have the top selling t-shirt in WWE selling, and they're going to be like, more than Rhea Ripley? I'm like, yeah, more than Rhea Ripley. Yeah, right. Here we are. So the fact that she got to WWE because of the Mercedes match, I'm forever thankful for Mercedes, because I don't think we get this Stephanie Vaquer in AEW anyway. So I'm happy for her, but I just think we have to start giving Mercedes the credit for being, as I stated last week, the most important women's wrestler of all time. Speaking of important women's wrestlers, I talked about Rhea Ripley because she normally is always number one in merchandise, and Stephanie has recently surpassed her. But you and I both agree with this. Whether Rhea Ripley is our favorite wrestler or not, we can both acknowledge she is the biggest women's wrestling star in the world right now.
She is currently,
any metric, she is, other than the t-shirt sales right now. But that could be a thing that's gone by next week if Rhea releases a new shirt, right? So
right.
Rhea Ripley, more than any other women's wrestler, moves the needle more than anybody else, more than Mercedes, more than Stephanie, more than Io, more than Toni, more than Blake, no more than anybody. She's the person, because the men in WWE, from CM Punk to Roman, I don't know if Roman ever compliments anybody, but CM Punk to Cena to The Rock to Seth to everybody, they're like, Rhea's kind of like the superstar of this company. Like, The Rock says, thank you, Rhea, for carrying the company. Like, people have acknowledged she's like the big star. Nobody says male or female star. They're like, Rhea Ripley's just the big star. We believe, but for as big a star as she is, she has been booked relatively poorly in
Yep.
terms of what stories they've told with her and how they have leveraged her phenomenal popularity. So we wanted to take this opportunity to spend some time about Rhea Ripley and like what direction we believe they could take her in to utilize her massive popularity to not only grow the women's division, but to grow women's wrestling. So I'll kick it over to you because I know you have some real strong thoughts on it. How would you book Rhea?
Yeah, I've tried to take a step back, and a lot of what we've talked about with Rhea was how we didn't like the Liv and Rhea feud, where it got to being a fight over Dom and all that. And I think Rhea is becoming more and more refreshing the further we get her away from Dom. Truthfully, and it's nothing against Dom. I think Dom's doing great work in his own lane, but Rhea just didn't need to be. It actually mutes her, in my opinion, right? Being around that. So I've enjoyed the work she put in around Money in the Bank. I appreciate that a star as big as her was one of the bigger bumpers in that match. Truthfully, I mean, she took some spots and some risks. Um, and I think you look at the numbers of what she's drawing on Instagram, on TikTok, and I'm not even talking about on the WWE account, her own account. She posts something on TikTok, and I mean, it's got like a gajillion views like 2 hours later. And this is real currency, right? This is real negotiating power to have such a big following. What does it mean for the women's division? Well, we have Evolution coming up, and it's like the one thing people complain about with Rhea is she's always around the title. And I actually think that she could be the very first woman in wrestling history to truly be above the titles. There have been a lot of women who, if WWE had done a better job booking, you could have done horsewomen feuds without titles and all that, but they don't. Okay, they don't, and they haven't. Naomi Jade was the first
if it wasn't for me.
WrestleMania match without a title ever, really non-stip for women. So my parallel for Rhea is the Undertaker. And it's actually on the, he came out, what was it, the Netflix premiere, and kind of gave her the rub. And I don't mean character wise and all that. What I mean is a match with the Undertaker became an event. For the last 20 years of his career, wrestling the Undertaker at WrestleMania became a prize as bigger than the title. Remember, Roman Reigns WrestleMania or main evented his, I think it was the third one he main evented, and it was against the Undertaker. No title, right? Maybe I'm crazy and the title was on the line, but I don't think there was a title there.
Which one?
33.
33 was against Roman Reigns. There was no title. No.
Right. So
Just a match. Mm-hmm.
And I think Rhea is so big that matches with her can be WrestleMania matches for the next 10 years of her career. I think you could put her on the WrestleMania card all 10 times, and only 3 or 4 of those need to be title matches. And 4, 5, 6 of those can be the woman is like, I have a match with Rhea Bloody Ripley on WrestleMania, and it will make the card, and she can be that first woman who's ascended to that WrestleMania no matter what.
Yeah.
And I think that that's a badge of honor that she should wear, and I think she's the one to do it. I think they could tell great stories, belt or not, and she'll always need to be on the card because, to your point, she's a big enough star. And I'm not saying keep her away from the belt forever and all that stuff, but they're so talented. She can be like that third major championship.
But
you have a WrestleMania match against Rhea.
What you're saying is accurate because the Undertaker had very short title reigns. He did not have many memorable go tell me the memorable Undertaker title reign. You can't. Because there are times he's held the belt for a month, 45 days, but he was the prize, not the title, right? Like, so, whether, and I go through history because Edge, when he main evented WrestleMania the first time, I think, yeah, the first time, because he did it with Reigns and Bryan. But when he did the first time, as he said, he goes, the Undertaker is the main event of WrestleMania, not the title. Like Undertaker became such a big part of WrestleMania that he was the main event. Like his match was the main event. Case in point, I've seen Undertaker. I've been to 3 WrestleManias in my life. No, yeah, I've been to 4 actually. You know, WrestleMania in Toronto against Ric Flair. Now, that was the one maybe WrestleMania where the Undertaker match wasn't the main event because Hogan Rock was the main event. I went to WrestleMania 24 in Orlando where it was Ric Flair, Shawn Michaels, Undertaker, Edge. That was one of the few WrestleManias where you could have made the case Ric Flair and Michaels should have gone on last instead of Taker Edge, right? Because of Flair's retirement. And then obviously I went to 33 with Shane McMahon. You know, I'd like to forget about that match just entirely. But I also went to WrestleMania 30 where Undertaker lost to Lesnar. You couldn't follow that. The crowd was done after that. Like it was over for the crowd. Like it took them a while to get back. To your point, let's stick to your point is valid. To me, when I listen to all these women who interview who are either coming to WWE or in WWE and they go, who's your dream match? They all say Rhea Ripley, Julia, Stephanie. You know, EO's had multiple matches with her, but you know, like Jada Parker. I've heard all these women, they're like, yeah, I want to Jade Cargill. I want to wrestle Rhea Ripley. Okay. That is how you do it. You basically make Rhea the goal. Like, think of what a Julia Rhea non-title blood feud for them could do for Julia. Like, even
Yeah,
if he
and
doesn't win the feud.
yeah, and I think that they can start establishing it with Evolution
Yeah.
because Rhea currently really shouldn't be in the title picture, but she's Rhea. She's going to get time, and she's going to have a singles match versus someone, I would presume, on Evolution. I did have one Rhea fan that I floated this to, and they're like, "You guys just want Rhea away from the belt." I just want to be clear on what we're advocating for. We want to see a world where when Rhea's not going against the title from January at Royal Rumble to April at WrestleMania, she's on TV every week in segments that matter every week with some juice in the story, and it ends with a singles match at WrestleMania that doesn't have a belt involved. Now, that's how they always kicked off Undertaker the last like 20 years. He cares about the belt again in January, so he's going into the Royal Rumble, and then someone pisses him off in the Royal Rumble or thereabouts, and that's who he's wrestling at WrestleMania. You could watch the Royal Rumble and be like, "Oh, it's going to be Taker so and so because of the spot in the Rumble." The reason why women's wrestling fans squabble so much about who the champion is because you don't get on the freaking card unless you're the champion historically.
Yeah, no.
And we're advocating for Rhea to break that cycle.
If Rhea Ripley versus Stephanie Vaquer happened, do people care that it has a belt attached to it or not?
Not at all.
No. Like, would I be any less interested in a Rhea Ripley Stephanie Vaquer match if they didn't have a title? I would. To me, I would care the same amount, which is I'd be super ecstatic whether they had a belt or they didn't have a belt. I think Naomi and Jade having that match at WrestleMania is going to be seen as a bigger, like that match is going to have more implications down the road than we realize if more women's non-title feuds get booked on Mania and other PLEs. Because look, I mean, the way it looks like right now is Naomi, who is as hot as any character WWE has,
smoking,
is going to fight Jade at Evolution in some kind of stip match. Well, that won't have a belt to it. I know Naomi has the Money in the Bank briefcase, but there's no title there. Rhea Ripley, I think this is the biggest compliment we can give to Rhea Ripley, which is we think she's such a big star. She doesn't need it. There's finally a women's wrestler who we think is so big she doesn't need the title. Because she is actually bigger than the title. Like, you know, Mercedes has the famous line against Bayley that my name is bigger than your title. Rhea Ripley legitimately is the embodiment of that. She's
Yeah.
Rhea Ripley. She's a bigger star than who are their current champions? Tiffany and Io? Nobody with any common sense will say Tiffany or Io are bigger stars than Rhea. Now, yeah, Io got as many cheers as Rhea at WrestleMania and at the Garden, but I mean, look at the merch sales, look at the TikTok, look at all that other stuff you're talking about. Nobody's close to Rhea Ripley in WWE. Yeah, Stephanie's outselling her right now, but then when you go on Instagram and you go on those things, there are people who don't know anything about wrestling who only watch for Rhea Ripley. So, you know,
A lot of women's fans over the years would say they don't need the title, the horsewomen don't need the title. I actually agree with you that they didn't, but the way the show was being booked, that was the function of the times that
yeah,
they were going to have the titles because they were going to be on the pay-per-views. Um, I think it's everything is lining up correctly. Rhea is the right star. It's the right time, the right booking, and I'll unless you got something else to add, I'll end with this. Rhea Liv had the opportunity to be one of the greatest feuds ever, and some people do think that it is one of the better long feuds ever. I think that they didn't end it very well with getting Dom too involved, but in a year or two or three, if Rhea and Liv were to have a tiff in the Royal Rumble or in the Elimination Chamber and it rekindled their feud, and they got to have the match that their fans always wanted them to have and have it at Mania, um, without a belt, I don't think anyone would be complaining, right? Because they didn't ever really get to have the match everyone wanted them to have. That classic that they're probably capable of. And again, think about all the great women's feuds. The one that was just on behind you, Bayley Sasha never wrestled at WrestleMania. Charlotte and Becky never wrestled one on one at Mania. Becky Ronda never wrestled at Mania. Liv Rhea have not wrestled at Mania. You know what I mean? Like there's not enough. There have not been enough spots on the card for some of these great matches to happen, and that's why it would be such a gift to the division for this for Rhea to ascend to this spot.
I do have one thing to end on. And you actually touched on it. You talked about how Liv Rhea could have been seen as one of the great women's feuds of all time. It might still be seen as a great women's feud. This is where I'm going to give WWE a lot of credit for that specific feud. Was the in-ring quality of that feud that good? No, I don't think so. I don't think they had any standout matches. I don't remember anything about that feud in the ring. But the TV ratings and the YouTube ratings and the TikTok ratings said it was a money feud. And to
Yeah.
WWE's credit, they leaned into it and they never cut their TV time. They never stripped it of its importance on TV. They got so much time with that feud because they saw the ratings. So again, it goes back to our first topic. You got to look at your numbers and give the people what they want. Because clearly we used to come on here and be like, the Liv Rhea feud's kind of dying for us. And then we look at the numbers like, man, it's not dying for the fans. So they kept it.
They had a 9 segment Raw where Rhea had
Yeah.
9 segments one time,
So,
9 times on TV.
so say what you will. WWE did the right thing and leaned into it. I think that Rhea is such a big star. She doesn't, like you said, she should always be going after the belt at a point in the year. But then, like you said, somebody gets in her way, and that is the feud. And I really want to see an evolution. I don't know. Maybe Julia is gonna beat Zelina for the US title at Evolution, and that's the match. But I want to see, like when Julia and Rhea had the face off, I want to see the Japanese Joshi machine Julia against Mommy, against Rhea, and I'll be very happy. That'll be an awesome feud. So yeah, we feel like Rhea Ripley should be given, like you said, the importance where she's as important as um anybody with the title. And yeah. So any closing thoughts this week?
Yeah, I think the one last thing, you kind of touched on it a little bit, but we've got Queen of the Ring coming up, and then Naomi killed it in her segment with Tiffany. Um, I think Naomi is one of the best characters in all of wrestling right now, and the way that she's handling the briefcase is exactly what we all knew she was capable of. Um, she said, "I'm not cashing in anytime soon. I'm going to do it on my time, but man, you're going to hate life while I have this briefcase," which I think is awesome.
Brilliant.
Just a great setup for a bunch of future things. And you know, she's going to be a highlight of our show going forward while she has the briefcase. Queen of the Ring. I love the finish of Alexa winning with Charlotte having the figure eight locked in on another competitor and her getting the pin. We're getting a Charlotte crash out at some point, which could only be good for the character because, you know, we need some growth and development there. Roxanne won in the other side. Jade also won on SmackDown, and so we got one spot left. And what do we got coming up on Monday? Stephanie,
Returning Oscar.
Asuka's returning.
Ivy Nile.
Ivy Nile. So does Stephanie win? Does Asuka win? Who's the fourth person in that match? What are your thoughts on Queen of the Ring so far? It's been better than the first one.
Oh,
That's
well,
for sure.
that was a very low bar.
Yeah. We forgot that Zelina Vega beat Liv Morgan in the first round of that Queen of the Ring in 1:55.
Yeah.
It's a fact. Look it up.
So Stephanie Vaquer versus Asuka versus Raquel Rodriguez versus Ivy Nile. That's the last qualifying match for the semifinals. So we have in the one semifinal already established Jade Cargill against Roxanne Perez. Alexa Bliss qualified on SmackDown. Tomorrow night, you're going to get the final qualifying match. My thoughts are you can do this one of two ways. And both ways work, quite honestly. You can go Stephanie Vaquer or Asuka against Alexa Bliss. I don't see Ivy or Raquel winning. Just sorry, fans of Ivy Nile and Raquel. I don't think they're winning. So let's say you do Stephanie Vaquer versus Alexa Bliss.
Would they cross shows or would it be versus Roxanne?
So it's Roxanne versus Jade right now. That's already the next match.
Oh, okay. So they are crossing shows on the next bracket. Okay.
And if it's let's say it's Stephanie Alexa, you can book this tournament one of two ways. The finals would have to be Jade Alexa, and that's where Charlotte turns completely and sides with Alexa and costs Jade. And then you set up Jade Charlotte at Queen of the Ring or at Evolution. Or Naomi costs Jade against Roxanne to set Naomi and Jade up. Roxanne wins, Stephanie wins, and it's Stephanie Roxanne at Queen of the Ring, and Stephanie wins, and Stephanie challenges Io at SummerSlam.
When's the final supposed to be?
It's the finals, I thought, were in Saudi Arabia.
Yes. Okay. Yep.
So the finals are in Saudi Arabia. So to me, if it's Stephanie Vaquer against Roxanne Perez, that's the best wrestling match you're going to get in the finals. Or Asuka.
I don't think we're getting that.
Honestly, Asuka Roxanne would be awesome too. But
yeah,
Jade Cargill. So you don't think Stephanie's making the finals?
I think Jade's winning.
You think Jade's winning Queen of the Ring? So you think Jade is getting a match with Tiffany at SummerSlam? Here's why I disagree. The Money in the Bank person is already in SmackDown. So wouldn't technically the Raw person have to win this tournament?
Yeah, I know they want Jade to be a big part of the Evolution card because it's in Atlanta and her home area. And maybe Queen of the Ring doesn't matter.
Yeah. Like to me, costing Jade, either Charlotte costs her against Alexa Bliss, but then the problem
I love that idea.
Right? Alexa Bliss gets, I mean, you could do it multiple ways. Alexa Bliss gets, but is Alexa Bliss Tiffany? Well, Alexa Bliss Tiffany, I mean, there's a very strong fan base for both women. That match would do good in some categories. I don't know if it's a professional wrestling match I want to see, but and I'm a fan of both of them, as everybody knows who listens to the show. To me, the easy story to tell is Queen Stephanie, and I'm not biased here, but it's Queen Stephanie against Io at SummerSlam. That's the easy thing to easy story to tell. Io wins that match. And again, this is where the Rhea thing is cloudy. Everybody has this booking of Io's going to keep the title all the way until Perth, Australia, and lose to Rhea because that's the Rhea finally overcomes Io. And honestly, from a storytelling standpoint, that's probably the right story. If you're going to
Yeah.
give Rhea the win against Io, finally, it should be in a big setting, stadium show in Australia. I mean, hell, I would actually want that because Rhea Ripley is going to main event Australia. So if I can get Io in the main event against Rhea and they have a killer match and she loses, I'm okay with it as an Io fan. But Queen of the Ring has been really, really good. Queen of the Ring has been really, really good. Quickly as we wrap here, NXT has 4 women's matches this week. 4.
Yeah.
On a 2-hour show, they have 4 women's qualifying matches for the Great American Bash title match. So Blake Monroe is the new name for Mariah May. It's a tribute to her niece Blake and Marilyn Monroe. 1, do you like the name? And 2, would you already give her the title?
If she had input on the name, then I like the name, and she did. So, my only complaint, and again, she had input. I think they should have kept the first name Mariah. But I think she's confident enough in her ability to market herself that she'll be fine. Um, most wrestlers try to keep the name, and we will give kudos to when someone can get over with a completely new name, i.e., Sasha to Mercedes. But this actually went the opposite way. Sasha was not her real name. Mercedes is her real name. Mariah is her real name. Blake is not her real name, so she's going the other way with it. But I think it's going to be fine. Would I put the belt on her? Yes.
Okay, so you just give her the belt right away. You don't think maybe Grace getting it, then Blake taking it off her? Because here's the thing that's going to be interesting. Blake Monroe, Mariah May, is one of the best women's heels I've ever seen of all time. She's up there.
Oh,
She's amazing. She's getting cheered every week because she's the AEW, transfer. I
right.
don't love her as a baby face. I think she is very poorly typecast. The same way I know she's so over, but I saw a little heel Tiffany this week and I was getting a little excited because I'm like, is Tiffany the good person in this Naomi feud? Because she did cost Naomi the title a bunch of times.
She
And
did.
and so it's like, to me, there's look, and I know people are gonna say it's because they're statuesque blonde beautiful women, but Tiffany and Mariah or Blake, they just feel heelish. Like they're so good heels. Like Alexa Bliss, to me, I know you're not a big fan of the heel character in 2017 because you felt like she went out there and just buried baby faces. But I got to tell you something. She was the only reason I watched WWE TV for a while. Like, Alexa Bliss was great.
Yeah.
It's just something about that mean girl character that I love. Whether Trish played it, Mariah played it, Tiffany played it, Alexa played it, I just like it. I am just a sucker for that character as a fan. Like, it sucks me in. So I could see both sides. I don't know. If you just give her the belt right away, aren't you kind of devaluing the rest of the roster?
Well, I'd have to know a couple questions. How long do they plan on her being in NXT, right?
Hmm.
Is it 3 months? Is it 6 months? Is it a year? Um, I think that'd be part of it. I think the giving her the belt right away is the only way that you start her down a heel path. Um, I don't know which babyface she could absolutely just hammer and have the crowd be so protective of the babyface that she would go heel immediately down there.
For all
Um,
of the great work that NXT does with the women, and they do phenomenal work, the one thing that, other than Stephanie Vaquer, they have not had a baby face that people like just rally around the way people rally around Willow. But the reality is, when I looked at Stephanie's character, I never looked at her as a baby face. I looked at her as Batman. Like I
she's a
just,
badass.
yeah, I just looked at her as the Dark Angel. I never looked at her as a baby face.
So their best baby face is probably Sol Ruca, right?
Yes. Okay. So
Um,
Soul's a good one. That's a good name.
Kalani was kind of that, and they've kind of like what they did with Roxanne. They forced an expansion of her character that's ultimately going to help her on the main roster, by making her be multi-layered, instead of just
Lola Vice,
babyface.
good baby face, but I don't know if she's good a baby face for the right reasons. Like I think so Lola
Maybe
Vice is because she, Lola Vice, like people like her.
maybe we just answered our own question. Maybe they're going to try her as a babyface because they don't have a lead one.
Yeah, maybe. All right. So we've kind of come to the end of the show this week. We've covered a lot of topics, obviously from an in-ring perspective, matches that we would recommend. I think both four ways on SmackDown delivered. I enjoyed
They
both of them.
did
I
very
thought
good.
Jade looked really good, especially that finish with Piper was great. I thought the Alexa Charlotte finish was one of the more creative finishes they've done in a long time in a women's match. That popped to me because I'm like, oh no, Charlotte's gonna win. And then Alexa quickly came, ref looked, he's like, well, you're not tapping. I gotta count the shoulders. It's a four-way. And Alexa kind of being the devil on Charlotte's shoulder, like, hey, you're kind of a loser now. And honestly, this is the best they have done with Charlotte in, I can't, maybe ever, where I don't, I love that she's losing so much because it's like the character is going somewhere. Like
Yeah.
she's hitting rock bottom and the crash out, as you said. And I think that it's something we've always wanted with the Charlotte character where they do something different. So yeah, lots of good women's wrestling out there. Go seek it out. Go support it. Um, on our page, like and subscribe. Spotify, YouTube being the primary platforms we would ask you to do it. We want to grow the show. We can only grow the show if you grow our subscription base and grow our likes. That's how this works. So please do that. And we're going to have a new segment coming this week, and it's an interactive segment that we want your opinion on, and you'll hear more about it on X.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.